I'm exhausted. I don't know about you guys. It's a lot to take in. I think it finally hit me today just how bad the results in Washington state are. And actually, we are an outlier nationally. This data is fascinating. And of course, there's still some votes left to be counted in certain states. So maybe this changes. But as of right now, Washington state is the only state in the entire nation that didn't move further to the right. If you compare votes for Donald Trump in 2020 with votes for Donald Trump in 2024, it's a fascinating. So I'm talking even California went 12% further to the right, 12 points further to the right for Donald Trump. New York, 11.6 percentage points further to the right. New Jersey, Maryland. And we're down the only state in the nation. We went 0.3% further to the left. Not overwhelming, but when you look at that shift nationally and the map, how it worked out with the popular vote is insane. I mean, you see just how tiny the little pockets in the country are. I mean, they represent obviously larger segments of the population, but even, down at the bottom with us, for instance, the one right above us is Oklahoma, which Oklahoma is solid red. So it's like, well, when you're that red, they literally didn't have one county that went for Harris. When you're that red, how much more red can you get? Washington state, the only state in the entire country that didn't shift further to the right. And I have to wonder why. I mean, I have my assumptions. I included it in our daily subscriber show poll today that went out just before we came live. And I threw some of those thoughts in there as options. And I'm curious to hear closer to the end of the show today what your guys' thoughts are on what would explain this. I really believe that media, and I'm not in every other state and every other city to see what their local media is like. I do know that ours seems at times to be hopelessly biased. I follow a lot of reporters in California and Portland for that matter. I don't think they're as biased as ours. I don't think they're as blatantly in the pocket of the Democratic Party. I see some great reporting out of San Francisco, some great reporting from mainstream outlets in LA, great in comparison to ours, where they're calling their elected leaders out on homelessness, they're asking hard questions about crime and all of that. And here they're just not. There was this article that came out today from Cairo 7, and I just thought, where was this article 3 months ago? When did they finally decide? 2 months ago, when the ballot language came out on the initiatives, which what do we say right away? Horrible. The way the initiatives were worded was awful. Clearly meant to confuse voters. Clearly meant to tip the scales in the favor of the no crowd. Here's what Cairo 7 comes out with today. Their headline: confusing verbiage may have influenced Washington voters on statewide initiatives, experts say. Well, no shit. Why are you putting that out the day after the election? If you knew it was confusing, you don't need an expert to tell you that. You read it for yourself, and the language was incredibly confusing. And so it's your job to make sure, not in a biased way, but to make sure that voters know what they're voting for. And voters know what the yes position is and the no position is. Instead, as the media, you just let them flail. And then the day after say, well, these all failed, or 3 of them. Must have been real confusing. It says a critical thing with referendums. This is from their expert, Christopher Adolph, a UW political science professor. A critical thing with referendums is how they're worded. Yeah, you don't say? He says, when people are uncertain about a referendum, research has suggested they often lead to voting no as a result. What the research showed us is that voters are much more in favor of carbon taxation when the benefits go to the environment. So these were all worded in a way that made clear, I think, to voters what the consequences were, which I don't think is true either. But we said that all along. When people are confused, they vote no. And what's interesting is that Donald Trump in our state got more votes than were yes votes on these initiatives. I don't know if it's for everyone, but for several of them. So you're telling me that there were people who voted for Donald Trump who then turned around and voted against these initiatives? That tells you they were confused. That tells you they thought they were voting for a different outcome. And I love this UW expert, right, who's clearly biased when he says, well, they were confusing, but the research showed that voters are much more in favor of carbon taxation when the benefits go to the environment. So these were all worded in a way that made that clear, I think, to voters what the consequences were. Yeah, but in a biased way. As we said before, with the initiative to repeal the Climate Commitment Act, it had that line like, oh, voting yes on this will take away money from clean environmental stuff or all this. But it didn't have a line that said, but voting yes will also reduce the cost of gas through the carbon auctions. It didn't have the alternative, the ways it would benefit you by voting financially by voting yes. So it was incredibly biased. But the media, the day after the election, oh, those ballot things were really confusing. You think? It's just insane. I don't know if it's like intentional bias, laziness, lack of reporters, lack of curiosity, an internalized belief that they are being fair. But unless the media turns things around, our state is going to continue to be this outlier nationally where everyone else is going to the right, seeing the failure of progressive politics and what it does. Even California, significantly so, California had the biggest shift to the right of any state in the nation. So you can't say it's like, oh, well, it's just we're a blue state. We're a very blue state, progressive state. Well, yeah, but look at California. They are also arguably more blue than us, and they still shifted further to the right. And they ousted in LA County. They're really soft on crime DA. Every county in the entire state passed a proposition there to crack down on shoplifting and drug abuse. Every county in the state of California. And then here we are sending a socialist out of Seattle to Olympia to make laws for everyone else. I mean, we've really lost our mind. Not only are we an outlier, we double, triple down on the failed policies that got us in the position that we are in right now.